and join me in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our monthly voting meeting of the York Suburban School Board. And before I ask Ms. Mason to do roll call, I'd like to welcome back Ms. Emily Bates, who has been gone for a while, and welcome back Mr. Joel Sears, who has joined us tonight on the to fill the 2-year seat that Mr. Eden had to vacate. So welcome back. We're pleased to have you at the table.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Ms. Mason, roll call, please.
Ms. Bates. Here. Mrs. Frederick.
Here.
Ms. Leopold Sharp.
Here.
Mr. Posno.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Mrs. Schrader.
Here.
Mr. Sears.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer. Here. Mr. Toman.
Here.
Because this is the voting meeting, there'll be 2 opportunities for public comment. One is now at the beginning of the meeting, and the other is at the conclusion of the business. So if you wish to comment on something that we're going to vote on, this is the time you would want to speak. You're welcome to step to the microphone and give your name and address. Please address the questions to the chair. Does anyone wish to speak?
My name is Dick Raw. I live at 2401 Cambridge Road, and I count it a privilege to be able to have a few comments here. I want to compliment you to begin with on the monetary benefits you gave Dr. Merkel on sick days and vacation days and so forth. I think that was a good affirmation and encouragement for her. And best wishes to the new superintendent, acting superintendent. I hope to get to know you as I did Dr. Merkel and had a variety of dialogue with her, so I hope I can have some good dialogue with you also.
And because you wear a Penn State hat, that we're on good terms already.
I like to start positive. That's great. I had a variety of good contact with Dr. Merkel, and I was saddened by the initial information of her illness, inability to complete, and then her resignation. And I prayed for her physical health and for the family as they deal with this. I think it's important for that. I am kind of surprised, though, at what I read in the newspaper with regard to the last meeting here. Our vice president had some good comments for Dr. Merkel, but I didn't hear anybody else make any positive contacts with comments about her. That's kind of surprised me because, you know, earlier this year, she signed a very lucrative contract, and it seemed that everybody here was very happy with the fact that she signed that good contract and was going to be here. And she expressed her comment of what an ideal job this was, and somebody said it's a teamwork. So I'm just kind of surprised at the change of pace there with regard to what your reaction is to her. My dialogue with her always was a variety of questions here, and she answered them as she could. It was more personal. She would set up an appointment, and I talked with her, and she always answered all my questions completely. She didn't reject any, and we had some good exchange. I guess part of it is being I'm a former teacher, and she's involved in education. Maybe that was part of the positive with regard to it. But I want you to know that I have already prayed for this school board. You're facing a tough situation now. So change of administration and a variety of things going on. I also was reading here of successful merit scholarships, and that's good. And also your BSA scores were good. So you're moving in the right direction, and I trust that you will continue. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you so much. Anyone else like to make public comment? If not, I ask that the board approve the minutes of our special meeting last Monday of October the 16th, 2017. The special meeting followed by the planning meeting of October 9, 2017, and our regular monthly meeting of September 25th, 2017.
Second.
Does the board have any questions or changes to those minutes?
Lynn,
Yes.
I just wonder if this wouldn't be an appropriate time to again say thank you to those members of the community who took the chance to step out and offer themselves in terms of fulfilling this role as a temporary board member. Just my hat's off to them that they took the time to do that. So
Thank
just
you
want
very
to go
much.
on record having said that. And
Absolutely. We were fortunate to have 10 members of the community who applied for the 2-year position. Each of them filled out an application, answered some essay questions. They weren't long essay questions, for those of you who are students. They were short. But then each of them sat before the 8 of us and answered a series of 7 questions completely off the top of their heads. They had no idea what the questions were going to be. And the commitment and the support for the district was really very palpable. And so we're very blessed, and we've encouraged each of them to run in 2 years when there's a school board election. Hearing no changes to the minutes, we'll approve those for audit. That's okay. Mr. Posnell, the treasurer's report.
Would any board member like any of these items considered separately? Are there any questions about any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below-mentioned items. It's A through F.
Unless I hear concerns to the contrary, I'll ask Ms. Mason to do this as a short roll call.
This
Any
will be
questions?
considered a unanimous roll call vote unless they hear comments to the contrary. Person approved.
Moving on to my report, I've already welcomed Mr. Sears. We're pleased to have you back. I want to let the board know that I've asked him to serve in Mr. Eden's seat on the Finance Committee, and although I didn't ask him if there are other committees that you feel strongly that you'd like to serve on between now and the end of November, Mr. Eden was not on facilities. He was on personnel. And I don't know whether personnel will be meeting in the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks.
There's nothing scheduled.
Nothing scheduled. So I think for now, probably you'll serve on finance till the new administration comes in and your committee assignments, the committee assignments are redone. But welcome, we're very pleased to have you rejoin us again. It's my responsibility as president to report that the board met following our last planning meeting, which was October the 9th, in executive session as permitted by Section 707 of the Sunshine Act. Following that meeting to discuss personnel matters, no action was taken. And we also met prior to this evening's meeting in executive session to discuss personnel matters. No official action was taken, and that was what delayed the start of the meeting, so I do apologize. And now I have what's perhaps one of the most pleasurable parts of my job this evening to congratulate our National Merit semifinalists and our National Hispanic Scholars. And lest you think that this room is crowded, it's my understanding there are 8 commended students, so in a month there will be 8 students with their parents, so we probably need even more chairs that time. These are not in the order on the agenda, but I'd prefer not to mess up the certificate, so I'm going to call the awards in the order that they're here. The first is Theodore Gunn, the son of Mr. Brian and Mrs. Eleanor Gunn, and he's receiving the National Hispanic Scholar Award. And I'm proud to say he lives down the street from me. And also receiving a National Merit Scholar Program National Hispanic Scholar Award is Shay M. Melendez, the son of myself and Ruth Melendez. And we have 4 National Merit semifinalists that we can recognize this evening. The first is Stephen W. Burkett, the son of Mr. Stephen and Mrs. Deborah Burkett. The second is Bryce P. Gavin, the son of Ms. Catherine Gavin. The third is Charlotte B. Nesbitt, the daughter of Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Jennifer Nesbitt. And the fourth student is Zizette Flum, the daughter of Mr. Kevin and Mrs. Micah Flum, and she's unable to be here this evening. She's at cross-country practice, and since districts are coming up, she's at cross-country practice. So, Ms. Irwin, would you see that she gets that?
We should have her in.
You should, absolutely.
Would it be inappropriate to get a group picture of those individuals with you?
Well, sure.
Okay. That's not necessarily a job of the superintendent, but I have my camera.
Well, and let's do it now, in case
Yeah.
you might be motivated to go home and study and you don't
Yeah.
stay for the whole evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Over
In
here,
this corner, or?
in this corner, yeah, there's good light in this corner.
Yeah.
Okay, kids, come on.
Come on.
Squeeze around. I'm just going to put it up here by the state flag. That seems appropriate.
Junior wants to. How's that tree is doing?
Now I feel like a shrimp stand. Yeah, you guys stand in front. I'll just stick my head in. I'm the shrimp in my family. Come on, yes, I'm the shrimp in my family now. So I'm used to being short. Are we all in or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Redding.
And I'll make sure our PR.
Thank you. I was going to say, Ms. Hirschner might be calling you for another
Yeah,
time.
yeah, maybe parent picture.
Oh, a parent picture,
You can just
absolutely.
sit
Oh,
back.
this is good.
One more picture.
There's another one back there.
Thank you.
Sharp looking group.
Congratulations again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Congrats.
And that also got done on camera.
Oh, that's true.
for
Up
this-
here, you're also now on the videotape of the meeting. So if you want to, wait a day or two till it's uploaded. You can go home and tell your far distant relatives to see yourself on the YS4 videotape. Bye-bye. And quite frankly, you are welcome to stay, but there's absolutely no need for you to do so. If you'd like to sneak out, this is a
And I
great
sort
time.
of predicted they would
Thanks
be
for
around.
Yes, good night. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
The lady's raising her hand. You may ask a question. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I guess we're at the wrong meeting.
Oh,
There
sure.
are several issues via Twitter and things like that.
Oh, all right, ma'am, is this a question for the school board?
Is that what we should be?
I don't know what your question, I mean, you're welcome to speak to us. Unfortunately, we had a public comment period at the beginning, and there'll be one at the end. You're
Right.
welcome, if anything related to the school district, you're welcome to speak at the board meeting or to speak to Dr. Redding, whichever you would prefer. But, I mean, but this is not the time in the meeting.
Okay, so there's several, so who do we contact to have a meeting about the other issues in the school?
Well, Dr. Redding?
I should contact you?
Yes. And isn't there another public comment?
There's a public comment session at the end if you'd like the whole board to hear. If you'd rather speak with him privately.
Yes.
I know, I would like the board to hear.
Oh, then absolutely, just sit down. It's not going to be a horribly long meeting, and we'll come to public comment at the end.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, it's no problem at all.
If I can,
And your young friend is remarkably quiet. I'm very, very impressed.
we're not done yet.
Thank you.
I just also want to update the board. You remember at the last meeting I asked for volunteers to serve on the nominating committee. Mr. Robinson has kindly offered to chair the nominating committee. Mr. Toman has offered to serve with him. The nominating committee must meet in public session, but they cannot meet until after the general election. Have you identified a time, Mr. Robinson, or not yet?
Not yet, but we will.
All right, well, he'll identify a time, and actually our next planning meeting is before the general election, so you could announce it then when you're going to meet.
We were thinking of announcing it at the next planning meeting.
I think that's a yeah, Mr. Robinson. And anyone else who'd like to serve, please reach out to me or Mr. Robinson. Dr. Redding.
Okay. First item on the agenda deals with a student enrollment report. That's a piece of information that's routinely shared with the board. Gives a snapshot, an October 1 count, which in the Department of Education world, this is the number that really drives a lot of the calculations. Your report also shows your class size, K to 5, and then the overall numbers in middle school and high school. And glad to see that it's part of this reporting where students are educated outside of the programs we have here. So those numbers are all part of this report and is public information to share. Any questions? It might also be referenced by Dr. Ketterman in her report later here in a couple minutes. So any questions for us at this moment? If not, I'll ask to flip to the next part of my report. And you're beginning to hear a lot of the information on school performance. There's the public release of information started last week and is going to extend through this week on how students throughout the state performed last spring on the PSSA and the Keystone exams. It's important for us as a board and as a community to understand what happens to that data. So, it's not just about what performance is attributed to our students, but there's also a piece of that goes to the teacher evaluation system that's in school law. And it's important for us to realize, and I just wanted to just briefly run through a couple slides. And again, this is information that's publicly available. Some of this is just available this week and last week to the school district as a preview, but it all will become part of the public performance profile. I have this slide up because this is the last year that Pennsylvania is using the SPP, School Performance Profile. Next year, that report will be migrating into what's known as the Future Ready PA Index. So there's a broadening of data points that will go into that profile. This year, and I think my next slide talks about that profile and how it's being used. Right now, 15% of the final teacher rating is information that comes into that profile. There's also the academic achievement, the subgroups that you've heard about for lots of years and how those subgroups are doing, subgroups based on economic need, ethnicity, and lots of other factors, whether we were able to close those gaps for English language learners, for students who have an IEP. There's also a calculation in the current system on how much growth occurs, and then there's other data points that are put in there. Again, this is the last year that Pennsylvania is using this method of calculating building school performance profile scores. And again, just some overall information on how that's calculated currently, and particularly in this district where we have a K2 building and then a 3-5 building, and what happens to those scores as we move through. This next set shows you what that number is for each of our buildings, and even though Yorkshire and East York or Valley View are K2 buildings, they do have a calculation where students who came from those buildings, when they did take a PSSA in third grade, those scores were mapped back to the performance. And then there's all the other calculations that are involved there. So just an overview. Today, I can't tell you how they compare to any other school because I haven't seen anything other than York Suburban data. But as I mentioned, and again, it's not so much about how we compare. It's all the data points that are there. My sense is that, based on the quality of programming that we have in York Suburban, that we're holding our own on some of these performance. As we do move to the new index, that actually goes into effect. I heard a piece of information this morning. There's a new factor that hasn't been used before. It's called Career Awareness, Readiness and Awareness Indicator. And during this school year, York Suburban and all the other 500 school districts have to identify at multiple points throughout a student's career in the school when they have had career exploration lessons, when they've had career exploratory programs, and we'll have to collect that piece of data and report that data for every student during this school year. Some of the other data points are being removed. There's supposedly less emphasis on the PSSA test results in the total factor, but obviously they will be part of the formula that's used next year to identify a building index score for each school district. And the weighting is changing. And the next slide does go into some of the things that it expands, which I think was part of the conversation. And I happen to be part of a group that met with PDE throughout the past couple years on moving away from an index score that was so heavily skewed to performance on PSSA to look at a broader sense of what school districts are doing to prepare students for both college and career. So there's lots of opportunities for the school to look at how many students are taking AP courses or college in the high school or international baccalaureate, students that take career and tech programs at York County Vo-Tech, for example, the reading assessments and what we're doing, not just on state assessments, but what happens locally and how our students are growing, and the emphasis being on growth and not performance on one set of assessments. So there are some changes ahead for what happens with that portion of the data. And because that portion of the data is connected to assessments, it's also noteworthy to say that this testing year, there will be less hours of test required when we get to the spring. So they're downsizing each of those language arts, math, and writing and science. So there's some things that are changing on that avenue also. Keystone exams have not changed. They're still specific to the courses that we have. But again, those data points are used for part of that. The other place where the individual student performance is used is this value-added system. And it takes multiple data points, and if a student has taken PSSAs for 3 consecutive years, they can predict where that student should be in year 4. And the growth that should be there is recognized, not just whether the student is proficient or advanced, but if a student started out the year in that basic category and had a year's worth of growth, then that is recognized in the value-added system. So the data that's used, it's not another test, it's another statistical analysis of the assessments that are being given, and the state using that information to help guide what we do for students and what we're looking at, and then to look at the instructional side and whether the instruction has been effective. And those scores then also get translated over to an individual teacher. So if a teacher is in teaching a 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade math or science or English language arts subject, and they've been teaching that subject for 3 or more years, this system will identify their effectiveness as an instructor. And I think the next slide talks about, those students and those teachers being grouped by dark blue or light blue, meaning those students really outgained what was predicted for them. Green means they made that year of growth that they were expected to make. and then those two bottom categories of students that really did not have a full year of experience. So the data has lots of tentacles as far as how it's used. We are required by law. Was this our fourth year of using the 82-1 forms that are mandated for teacher evaluation? These results are plugged into the teacher evaluation system, so we haven't been able to complete last year's final teacher evaluations because we've been waiting for this result and the building scores. So the PVAS performance it's given to us by student, it's given us by building, it's given to us by teacher, it's given to us by test, and it's also the keystone subjects, not just the PSSA. So someone's teaching algebra, a teacher biology, and is it 10th grade language arts, Tawn, or do you know where we give the keystone in the high school? Is it 10th grade or 11th grade? Okay, anybody in 10th grade? So 11th graders take the ELA test. Thank you from experience. Okay. And then this is a sample reporting where we do get how the assessment, this is science in, PSSA science in both 4th and 8th grade, which are the only two places that students take the PSSA science, and what is happening in the year, and what is our 3-year average for the students. And we have this same type of report for all the subjects and all the tests. Look like you have a question, Joel, that you want to...
Well, yeah, the PSSAs are grades 3 through 8, correct?
Yes.
And we do Keystone Biology when they complete the course,
Mhm.
and we carry that forward, I guess. We bank it until they're 11th graders.
Yes.
And the question, I guess, relates to how you do PVAS in those 3-year periods when there's no real regular testing going on with high school kids. How do we do that? It just seems to me that there's this gigantic blank. You can track PSSAs from 3 to 8, and you can look at every year's performance with every cohort, but then you lose them.
Well,
Not
you do...
We lose them.
The results that are given to us are not individual student results, but there is a group of students every year who's taking the Keystone Algebra. So there's a body of information, and it's not student to student, but it's those students compared to what their history was.
I mean, my comment's more rhetorical than correct, because we have what we have. And as far as getting insight to parents, educators, the community, whomever, I would suggest that we, as a district, should give some real hard thought to having our own metrics. Because these things, as well defined as they are, don't tell the story.
And that's a good segue into my last slide here. What do we really do with the data that's collected? And it's not just about the student individual performance, although that is a metric that everyone wants to know. Are students in 3rd grade performing the 3rd grade or the 4th grade or whatever skill set? So we do look at how individual students are performing, and every student who takes a Keystone or a PSSA gets an individual report. And those reports, I think, went out maybe at the end of last school year, if York Suburban was like my previous history.
The individual student reports?
Yes.
PSSAs,
Yes.
went out at the beginning of this.
They went out at the beginning of this school year. So individual students do get feedback. From a building and an administrative level, it's looking at that group data and saying, okay, on this standard, did all of our students perform at the highest level? And if not, what are we doing in our curriculum that maybe needs to be adjusted? Or what experiences do we have? So it's about helping us guide the curriculum from the standpoint of the instruction. If I saw a teacher year after year after year that was at a yellow or red level, that's a flag for me, because I know what the research says about ineffective teachers. We don't have any of those here in York Suburban from the first glance through, but if we had teachers who had 3 consecutive years, their students were not meeting the standards, then it's our duty as administrators to look at the instruction and look at what might. Now, there are reasons. If somebody's teaching a whole class of special ed students every year and they're a challenging group to work with, that might be a different factor. But it is part of our conversation of what we need to do instructionally, and because it's tied to the evaluation system, it's the time where that building administrator has the conversation with that individual teacher about what is happening in the classroom. I will also address one of the things that I found out the first day on the job was how do we do classroom observations, because this system still relies very heavily on going into the classroom by a trained administrator and seeing firsthand what's happening. Right now, it's about 50% of the final evaluation score. When we move to the index, it hopefully goes up to 60, 70%. But right now, the administrators going into the classroom, sitting down with formal, informal observations, doing walkthroughs, those data points are also part of that final teacher evaluation. It's a piece of it. And to your point, Mr. Sears, about locally, I think that's why there's a push to move more of the, I'll use the official term, Danielson domains for the weight of what is happening in our final teacher evaluation. But again, if there are pockets of data that show us we're not meeting the curriculum or something's wrong in the instruction, then certainly that's our duty to make those adjustments. And I think that's what I wanted to share. Any other questions? I didn't know how much we needed to go in depth, but you will begin to access that information on the PDE website for every district in Pennsylvania, and you needed to see what was happening.
Is it up on their website yet, or is
No,
it probably?
no. I think it was Thursday or Friday. I think Thursday or Friday of this week it may be PD's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Bates.
Yes, I'm sorry, I did have one question. The career awareness instruction, is that, are we doing anything different than we have done in the past, or is that looking at our curriculum and saying, we talk about this in this year, this year, this year?
I'm not sure that I have the full answer, but let me maybe answer it in a little bit of a backdrop to why it is now part of this new index. There has been a lot of conversation about what good things are happening in public schools that don't show up on the indicator of success. And the previous performance profile missed out on a lot of good things that are happening in schools that should be labeled as and given points for leading to the successful school district. So the philosophy behind putting it there was twofold. One, to make sure that schools do have a constant focus on what should happen with career awareness. And secondfold is to recognize those schools that are doing that and incentivize those that aren't. I'll speak from my experience. I know we have career days at our elementary schools. I know our guidance counselors are teaching lessons. We have lots of good career exploration programs. I don't know yet what it looks like here at York Suburban, but my sense is we're doing a lot of those things. It's now we just have to collect a piece of data, put it in the PIM system, and let some statistician do a calculation on how many points.
Specific guidelines as to what constitutes career readiness?
I think, no.
I think what worries me is
Yeah.
that if you are a district that has 99% participation in college after school, you know, career readiness means something entirely different than
Yeah.
for a different district demographic.
Dr. Ketterman looked this up.
You wanted to jump in?
And it's career awareness,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's different.
Yeah. It's awareness.
What would you, how do you define it?
Well, I'm thinking back to, my kids and one grade, they had to do it, the research paper was on a career. And in the middle school, they had to take a battery of tests that told them they were gonna be, surgeons,
That's fab.
cutters, or whatever. And so those are the kinds of things that I remember, but, that was a long time ago.
Well, there are curricular benchmarks that the state has as well. In this grade, we talk about certain career awareness concepts, and I mean, even in kindergarten, you can talk about career awareness. So I think it's a little more concrete, I think, than maybe we're aware of. That might be a good,
Yeah.
point to information to bring to the board at
Sure.
some point.
Yep. Yep. What does it look like here in York Suburban?
Yeah.
But we have to collect that information this school year, which was a little bit of oh, okay. And we have to put it in our student management system, and we have to tie it to each individual student, and it needs to be uploaded in the PIM system.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and that's First, I'll reserve judgment. Then. I'm on tape. Okay. Any other questions? Certainly, we can come back around to this topic.
I can pop on one if you want.
Absolutely.
So I know just from me being in school, in 8th grade, I know we have to take a bunch of different tests and everything, and to me, they were just more confusing than anything, because I know one of our top performing, science people, I guess, I don't know, in my grade, she was told she was going to be a ballerina by that, and I don't know, for me, starting 8th grade as a 14-year-old, and trying to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life, which is ideally what you want to do. It was, I guess, just overwhelming. And then I know our 9th grade research paper was what we wanted to do when we grow up, and I know for me, mine is much different than what I do now, or I don't know what I project. But I think with anything, we should work towards pushing it back a little bit. And I know that's not usually what people like to hear, but it's a lot to take on that as a student and think about that and have a goal in mind. And you can have those goals and everything, but I think all these premature tests and everything, just try and figure out and tell you what you should be. It's completely individualized to every person. Every person's different, and a test isn't really good to show you that. And I know in 10th grade, I don't really even remember anything about talking about awareness of it, and it kind of just fell off. And I know now, with all of the college visits and everything, I know a lot of people are just really, really lost. And so I don't know how to exactly fix that, but I think it starts off super early, and then personally I think it kind of drops off at the time when we should be
Refocus.
hitting it most. So that's just my opinion, but
Fantastic comments. Thank you so much.
yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. And throw in the dynamics of how quickly jobs are changing, and stuff we're preparing kids for 5 years from now. What I see, the majority of the jobs that we need 10 years from now, we don't even know the names of the jobs right now. So it's So excellent. Good conversation. Next item on the my report, agenda-wise, is the recognition of 2 board members who are receiving School Board Association recognition for their 20 years of service. And I don't have the advantage here in York Suburban to know specifically what Ellen and Kathy have seen in their 20 years, but I can generically talk about the vision and the planning that goes into being a board member and the goal setting that has occurred and the challenges that they've worked through as board members, and certainly each one of our board members sitting here when it talks about being a volunteer and doing something as a public service without any type of compensation, making sure that the district lives up to the standards that are set, and working to make sure the financial resources and the human resources are there to back up those goals and those objectives. And I commend you both for the continuity that you've provided to this board and this community. And on behalf of the PSBA group, it's my pleasure to present each of you with certificates, and I'll ask you to maybe help so that I can get my camera out.
I think we
Let me do the initial handshake.
All right, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You want to stand over there?
No, I think they can be alone, that's fine.
They don't have to be alone.
They can be alone.
Two of them, as long as I'm not.
This should work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's something you need to add to your resume, that you're handy
I did give up my Twitter account, GASD Super 1. But, yeah, my pleasure to, yeah, thank you very much. Next piece I'm going to hand off to Dr. Ketterman for our reporting.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was charged with sharing with you our new student demographic report this evening. So first I wanted to just give a little preface here. You can go ahead and go to the next slide there, Wendy. Just to say who was included in this. And we basically are counting the new students that are receiving education in our 6 buildings. So we did not include kindergarten students, of course, because they're all new. And we did not include the students who are being homeschooled or might be getting schooled from Cyber School. And we use that ever popular October, first Monday in October, that October date to determine for the data in this report. Okay. We can actually go on to the next slide. So our new students, and who are they? First, we took a look at where they came to us from. So you can see we have 186 new students this year. Most of them, of course, coming from local districts in York County. It is worth noting that we gained 10 students from cyber charter schools, homeschooling, and we also got 10 students in from private schooling. And then we just did make a note there that the out of country, which is a pretty high number, we have, it's 2 of the students are foreign exchange students, but 15 others came from other countries.
Why is out of country on their flights?
County.
Out of county, yes. And then, so who are these 186 students? So we take a look here first at their race and ethnicity to kind of get a feel for who they are. And we'll look at this a little more globally then as well. And then just looking at, again, just the new students. So we have about 50% of them that are on free and reduced lunch. Those students on an individualized education plan, needing some special services, special education students, which you'll see later, that's kind of low this year. And then limited English proficiency, those students that need English language services. So to give it some context and comparison, first, and we also looked at those students who have withdrawn from last year to this year, just again to give an idea. So you can again see that overall we
definitely have a gain of students this year. Again, I think worth noting is the whole cyber charter and homeschool area. Although we did have some that withdrew to go there, it's still, we've drawn more back into the district, and same with private schools. Okay. This again looks at comparing, so what we're doing here is the column labeled district. Those are our currently enrolled students, including kindergarten, but not including this group of 186 students. They're still separate. So again, just to give you an idea of the percentages and how they compare to those that are coming in, to those that are already enrolled. And again, same thing with our free and reduced lunch data, with our IEP data. Again, looking like this year is a little low for what's normal, and then our limited English proficient students. So then to give it a 3-year comparison, just to get an idea of trends and whatnot, again, here is a look at, again, this is just new students. So if you look down at the bottom, the number of new students that we had, 144, last year 110, and then this year 186. And then you can see again the race and ethnicity and how that compares over the years. And then I took it out to a more global view and looking at all of the students in the district, the trend over the last 3 years. So again, you can see, for example, if you look at the, I think it was Hispanic this year, we had a little bit of an uptick, and you can see overall the, you get a better picture, I think, of the global picture when you look at all students. And then looking again at those free and reduced lunch students, again, it's been on a slow, steady increase over the 3 years. If you look again at the special education students, that's been this year, maybe we'll have to see if that tends to be an anomaly. And then with the language students, again, you can see that we definitely were up this year, and last year was somewhat of a low year for us. And then I again took that to the next chart and looked at those percentages for all students in the district. Just to kind of look at the trend. So again, you can see our free and reduced lunch continues to grow. And again, those same, it continues to grow in our limited English proficient as well. And so just to summarize, and these were all points that I kind of made throughout, our enrollment numbers are higher than our withdrawals. The slow and steady growth in free and reduced lunch. Diversity continues to grow as well. New students for special education and language services, again, there's kind of been some years that fluctuated a little bit. And I just mentioned again at the end that those that are in private and cyber and charter schools, we did gain more students from them coming back than actually withdrew to those organizations. I do have within the report 2 more slides that I didn't really want to go over here because I was curious about those students. Remember I said that I was only looking at students that are within our walls. So I actually did some of that same number crunching for those who we are, sending out, who are part of our district that are going to cyber, charter, and homeschooling and that kind of thing. And so they're in for your information on the next couple of slides. We're just calling them non-YSSD, although they are residents of our district. Any questions?
Ms. Bates.
This is a question that I don't know how, if you can or if you have gotten at. And that is, if you have a new student and then they exit and then they come back and they're a new student or a renew student.
Renew.
Is there a way that we can, I guess it would be a measurement of transients. So how many kids that
Leave
that
and come
left
back.
and then come back, and it's not just totals, I'm curious about individuals, and so maybe it's not something you can get at, but I'm wondering how our transient the population is. Is there any way to get at that?
Probably.
Probably, yeah, I would think there would be.
Students who had more than one change in status during the school year. It's
Just
I don't-
feels like that's something that has increased, where we get, families that move in and then they move out and then they come back and, like I said, I don't know. And I don't know that a lot of effort needs to be put into it. I'm just curious if there's a way that you could get an idea about that, because it seems like it would matter to a building.
Other questions of Dr. Ketterman?
I have just a comment. I think this is really valuable information for the entire community to see and know. I mean, it's nicely presented, but there's some surprises, and if you ask me, I think I know our school district, but I was sort of surprised at some of these, and I think certainly the average resident would say, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. So thank you for bringing this information to us. It's interesting.
Mrs. Fryer?
Tom, was there a concerted effort, as in a few years past, to contact those people who are in cyber charter schools or York Regional Academy or whatever
Yeah,
it is?
we've done that annually. Yeah.
There's obviously some success.
Right.
Send students back. Okay, good.
Other questions? Mrs. Shea?
I don't have a question, but I do just want to echo Roseanne's comments. I thought it was very well done. And I'm just wondering if some of this information might be deemed appropriate for next year's annual report. That maybe that's a good way to get it out there. So just throw that in there.
Or even to highlight it on our
Did you know?
Did you know on the website. I mean, I think I've heard just anecdotal comments from members of the public say, I kind of watched that and I didn't know that, so might be something to put
You
there.
kind of get drawn in until
Yeah,
it starts to,
repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good suggestion, thank you.
Anything else?
No, I think that's all for our
Concludes
reports.
your report?
Yes, concludes our reports.
Ms. Mason, we're moving on to you.
Thank you. First item, the administration recommends board approval of the 2017-18 IDEA B pass-through funds allocation agreement with Lincoln Intermediate Unit 12 for a total allocation of $458,200.73.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions of Ms. Mason? That can be a short roll call.
This would be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, the administration recommends board approval of the contract for professional services with PSBA for a compensation analysis and market assessment for administrative and support staff compensation practices for a total cost of $5,500.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
Is this something we've had done in the past? Ms. Mason, or we?
2010-11 was the last time that was done.
Another question? No, that can be a short roll call.
This would be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, the administration recommends board approval of the resolution authorizing the York Suburban School District to incur non-electoral debt to be evidenced by one or more series of general obligation bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $17 million for the purpose of financing various capital projects and costs of the issuance.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions?
Steve may
Mr. Havas is here. I'm sure he wants to speak. But before, I'm just waiting to see if there's questions before you even start. I guess not. You can speak first. Thank you.
Great. Steve Hollis from Stockton Meter Bond Council. And just by the way, my 8th grade test said I should be a pastor. I get the confusion. As an 8th grader, I really want to hear you should be a pastor. So I did the second best thing and became a lawyer. I felt like I was in a gold mine because I'm going to come in here and basically clean up all the hard work noted in the introduction, it can be broken up in more than one series, so we can take advantage of either bank qualified added advantages in years to come, or depending on when you are going to be actually needing the money over the years. So once again, RBC's done the legwork, the business manager's done a fabulous job. On page 19, we set forth the parameters by which you can issue the bonds, which indicates at the end of the day, you are approving the bond purchase agreement from RBC Capital Markets, and the actual price is going to be no less than 95% or greater than 125% of the par amount of bonds, which is a standard in the industry. It also limits the underwriting discount to no more than $10, which is standard in the industry, as well as the parameters set forth the max interest rate of 7%. Don't get worried, you're not going to be issuing bonds at 7%, but as we've noted in the past, when you get a parameters approval with DCED, you cannot exceed that parameter when you venture to go out and issue your bonds. So obviously, RBC is going to put a very high interest rate in there just to ensure that if there's any maturity that in fact needs to be priced a little bit differently, we have the flexibility to come back to the school district with the best financing plan. Ultimately, there's going to be a confirmation for each bond sale. The president, vice president, as well as the business manager is authorized to execute that confirmation, but when executing it, they'll need to confirm that it meets the parameters set forth in paragraph 6 of the resolution, which once again is on page 19. That's basically 26 pages. You've been through this again. It is required by DCED as well as the Local Government Committee Debt Act that you approve it by resolution. We will file an application with DCED that then ultimately will go on your debt statement. Sometime in 2018, we'll go up to the bond market and actually price the bonds.
DCED.
Department of Community and Economic Development. They oversee all school districts in the issuance of debt. So therefore, under the Local Government Unit Debt Act, there are parameters to ensure that school districts do not issue more debt than they actually can afford. And therefore, that application is that check and balance that we're within our debt statement as well as the parameters by which we can borrow.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Come back when time comes that we actually.
That's the whole thing about these parameters that we've established, that you've set the parameters. You won't see me again, but congratulations on the 20 years, as well as you have. But it's set forth in here that we can administratively approve the confirmation of the bond sale.
And this is good for, and I think I asked Tim Phillips this, kind of just out there, this.
We have a limitation that this approval is good for 1 year, and that if they do not issue the bonds, we can come back and get it reauthorized by resolution. So it's not out there forever.
Okay.
It's a 1-year authorization.
Other questions? I know the Finance Committee spent time discussing the dollar amount. Ms. Mason, if no questions, I think we should do a roll call on this, please.
Okay. Toman?
Yes.
Schaefer?
Yes.
Leopold Sharp?
Yes.
Fryrick?
Yes.
Sears?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Bates?
Yes.
Posnow?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas, you may be excused too.
Thank you.
Thank you. The administration recommends board approval of the 2016-17 audit report.
So moved.
Are there any questions for Ms. Mason or Mr. Posnow? Hearing none, we can do a short roll call on this.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Last item, the administration recommends board approval of a transfer of $300,000 to the capital reserve fund.
So moved. Second.
Any questions?
How much is that going to give us in the capital reserve account then?
I believe it will be about 1.8.
Okay.
This was the line item that the board approved when they adopted the 17-18 budget.
We can do a short roll call on that, Ms. Mason.
This would be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. First item for discussion is the class size report. This came out of main reason it was taken to finance was because there was no personnel committee meeting, and we wanted to bring it forward. This is a follow-up to the class size report that Dr. Ketterman gave that showed we have an issue with our second grade, and that all 10 of the second grades are over the guidelines that the board has set as far as class size. There's two school of thought on this that came out of finance. One is to hire 2 full-time pairs, one at each building, for a total cost. This would be about $48,000. The number that I presented at finance was incorrect. It is $48,000 because that does include the insurance. There is insurance on the full-time pairs. If we go to 4 part-time, which would be 2 at each building, that total is just under $30,000. So we're bringing that
The
forward.
numbers don't make sense. They really
You
don't
definitely
make sense.
you definitely redo them.
What's the recommendation of administration?
Two full-time, just because of the continuity that they would provide to instruction and the likelihood that we would attract a candidate who has better credentials.
And we finish the year. These would be substitute positions. We're not looking for permanent positions because when we look at the class size requirements for the following year, for 3rd grade, we're actually okay with the 2nd grade students moving forward. So these are just substitutes that would fill out the remainder of the year.
Is this something that, Mrs. Farquhar, that you want us to vote on this evening, or is this just a discussion item?
This is a discussion item. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Say, but for a substitute, we don't need to approve a position. When we have names for the positions, those we will bring forward for board approval.
Yeah, that's typically how it works for policy. So as soon as you have someone you want to hire,
Fine.
put the
Okay.
people on the agenda.
Mrs. Farr.
Is this going to give us one person in each building enough coverage in all the sections? Am I just, or whatever it is they're going to be, helping out, I just told them. Don't know where to look here. No, well, that's why I looked at, oh, I need more. but,
Dr. Monas, could you use more?
One would be appreciated.
That's why I was thinking, I looked first and thought, part-time, you should have 2 people, even if one's ill, they're there, but I just, is one enough to cover the number of sections that you have in each building for these, these little kiddos?
Again, the attempt would be made to limit or to make the student-to-teacher ratio better, the student-to-adult ratio better in any way we could. And so they would be working with small groups of kids, pulling from classrooms or pushing into classrooms. And again, I know any help would be appreciated.
In each, how many grade sections are you?
There's 5 in each.
5 in each building.
5 in each
Okay.
building.
That's a lot of territory for one person to cover in the course of the day, it would seem to me, unless they're pulling kids out and grouping them as opposed to pushing into
Exactly.
classrooms.
They will work to optimize that
Okay.
person's help.
All right, that's what the building administrators think will work.
No, that's really what I was trying to figure out, what the logistics, how that works logistically with 5 classrooms for one person. If they were going from classroom to classroom to classroom, but you've explained it's not that, it's small groups, so,
Right.
yeah.
It's
So-
like I said, they'll determine which way it
Right,
will
yeah.
work
Got
best to
it.
try to
Got it. There,
Jump
yeah.
in.
get hands on the most kids.
Mr. Monas, jump in if you'd like to talk about.
These folks could pull 3 kids from 3 different rooms at one time for a specific intervention to help on a math skill or a reading skill. So they can have multiple classrooms at once.
Mrs. Schrager, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of echo what Dr. Redding said with regard to the quality of the hire is going to be so much better if you have 2 full-time as opposed to 4 part-time. And very often we have a turnover in these, so the idea of a substitute these people may well be hired next year for a similar position, and as we don't know that obviously, but once you get good people on board and then there are vacancies and openings elsewhere, they often just fit right in. So I certainly think we're on the right track to go with the 2 full-time, even though the cost is a little more with regard to benefits and all, and in my view, it's money well spent.
Other questions? You have your direction.
We will move forward. Broad budget goals, this is the time we usually bring them to the board. The intent of the administration is to present to the board a budget not to exceed the index by May 7th of 2018. And that would be when our preliminary final would be, as according to the budget timeline calendar. Present to the board in timely fashion all information and materials needed to make informed decisions. This will be through Finance Committee as well as the planning meetings, and again, follow the budget calendar that has been established. And evaluate all programs to identify areas in which expenditures can be reduced with minimal impact on students. So through all of this, administration promises the board we will do our due diligence. Seek additional revenue sources. That's something we always try and do, whether it's through grants, scholarships, or working with different, I know one of the areas we're exploring administratively is with our STEAM, is maybe can we work with some of the corporations in the county to get some type of promotion from them. So that's one of the areas we will be exploring this year. And finally, and probably most importantly, to make fiscally responsible recommendations to the board, making prudent use of all of the resources that we have available to us.
Any questions, Mrs. Schaefer?
I'm just wondering if that item can be a link so that the public is able to view what you just said?
Sure.
Wendy's.
Thank you, Ms. Irwine. She'll link it
She's
tomorrow.
she's on top of
She's
it.
on it.
Maybe even late, yeah, probably.
No, tomorrow.
It'll have to be tomorrow because I have to type it.
Thank you.
And our index, again, remind me, what is our index?
Our adjusted index is 2.8. And you see on the information, there's also 3 donation items that are listed. And then for the food service department report, the dining report, and sales report, were there any questions on that? That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Ms. Atkinson.
Alright, so a couple of days ago on Thursday, we had a fall concert. It went really well, in my opinion, and the opinions of teachers and parents. So it showcased the orchestra, choir, YS singers, and band. And the orchestra even welcomed back a YS alum to play the electric guitar for some of the pieces. The band also celebrated Band Day on Friday before the football game against Dover that unfortunately ended in a loss. How it goes sometimes. And then as for in the classroom, following a 2-period exam, the AP Chem class took a field trip to the UTS factory to tour their chemistry lab and plant. And then unfortunately on the other side of that, I've heard a lot of complaints from the AP biology students because there have been significant funding cuts to their class. So field trips that they've taken up until this year, such as a trip to Millersville to see Cadaver Lab, and one that for a string study, and also the cat dissections, they've all been cut from the class. And it's because 60 students are now taking AP biology versus I think it was 30 last year, so it's doubled. But just from a student perspective, I know how difficult that course is. It's extremely rigorous, and I think that taking away some of the most enjoyable parts of the class is really sad, and I know that all, if not, or most, if not all, of the students are disappointed in that. And just because there's a higher number of students, they shouldn't be deprived of these important hands-on activities. So, on to another subject. Both the boys and girls cross-country teams won their division in counties. Bryce Ole there's limited seating because I was talking to a cast member and seating is actually on stage, so I guess it's like an intimate production. I'm not really sure, but I guess it'll be very cool, I'm sure. And then the middle school is having their Halloween dance on Friday, and Yorkshire and Valley View are also having their dance-a-thons. And then the middle school and high school are getting their report cards on Friday, so that's what we have to look forward to. And then lastly, 2 German students have visited York Suburban twice in the past 2 weeks. I have one. Her name's Lena from Leitfelder Eckerdingen near Stuttgart, and they're coming from York Training Association, so she'll be here till Saturday.
Welcome.
That concludes your report. And can I make a personal pitch for the girls volleyball team, which has made it to the district playoffs, and they play 1:30 Saturday at home in the first round. At home. Committee reports. Mrs. Schaefer.
What she said, start there. She's always so, just delivers such a comprehensive report. The only thing I really wanted to add was, we all mentioned how pleased we were with how many folks came out with respect to the applicants for school board, and just, I think we're all very pleased with the number of people that were willing to step up and do that. But in addition to that, I just wanted to mention, I know it was a fairly long evening for us with respect to interviews, a little bit different from what we typically do in the evenings when we do meet, but I thought the process went very well, and I thought it was well done, and I just wanted to compliment the rest of the board, say good job, everyone. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Pose now, Finance Committee.
The minutes of August 23rd are provided. That's all I've got.
Ms. Bates, you're back to do the personnel report.
I am, thank you very much. Also, I wanted to point out that there is an addendum at the end of the agenda that is included in what I'm about to say. You have before you the personnel report, which includes resignation, appointment, employment, leave of absence, reappointment of extracurricular advisor, reappointment of winter coaches, guest teachers, volunteer winter coaches, and volunteers. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions? Yes.
Under appointments, there seems to be, for the Environthon advisors, we have 2 for Indian Rock and 1 for East York. Is there just not as much interest in East York, or as many students, or under, I'm sorry, it's under 2 appointment?
Wasn't
I'm
there?
just waiting by, that's why.
Second, technically.
We have a second.
Thank you. I can't answer that. Can someone?
East York Environthon is just getting going. They had their first one, grade 5 last year. This year's for grade 4.
Okay. I just didn't know what, and so, but at Indian Rock there are...
Indian Rock actually had theirs for... Yeah.
So they involve more grades in it, is what you're telling me?
No, the buildings are getting more involved in it now. Indian Rock's had it at least 5 years that I'm aware of.
Okay. I just didn't know what that was all about. And then there's a difference, and we've had some aides leaving instructional support aides at East York. Are we going to be replacing them?
Yes.
We are going to be replacing them. Okay. I saw some others down here, substitutes, and I didn't know if they were going to be considered, or there are other people interviewing.
Yeah, some of them are waiting for paperwork, and we're in the interviewing process.
Okay, all right, because I know they're just too valuable to not be. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Schrader.
Yeah, with regard to winter coaches, the reappointment of the winter coaches, are we, with winter sports just around the corner, are we fully staffed? Do we have openings yet? Because I'm not seeing all of the, winter coaches aren't all listed there, so I don't know if that means we're
Still looking.
short-staffed or...
Yeah. Does anybody?
I do not know, but I can get that answer.
Yeah, if we could find out. Like, for example, there isn't a assistant girls. I mean, that's just one example. Well, yeah, further down there is. so never mind about girls' basketball. But I'm just interested in knowing if we're fully staffed or if we have openings. Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Mason, is the, maybe this is a question for Dr. Ray, the school nurse, is she the school nurse who's been in place for a while and is now being hired as a school nurse?
Correct.
As opposed to a health room assistant? Okay, thank you. Yes. Any other questions? Let's do this on a roll call, Ms. Mason.
Robinson,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Tobin,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Fryrick,
Yes.
Sears,
Yes.
Leopold Sharp,
Yes.
Posnell.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other committee reports this evening? And Mr. Sears, I should have given you a heads up. We have intentionally minimized the number of committee meetings in this fall period when we knew we were going to be short-staffed with administrators. Several of the board members are involved in negotiations, and we've tried to keep those meetings at a minimum, which, for example, is why there hadn't been a personnel committee meeting. The Lincoln Intermediate Unit Board report, we don't have by dawn's early light right now, and so I guess there's any information to be shared. Ms. Mason? Dr. Reddy?
I did learn that the executive director of the IU, Dr. Leanne Zeroth, is going on medical leave and will retire from that position. And their assistant director is filling in. So it sounds like they're going to be dealing with a vacancy either at the director or the assistant director.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone's heard?
I got that at the PSBA conference as well,
Okay.
from a former colleague on the board who said, "Rich, you picked the right time to leave, buddy."
Who's the assistant?
Jody Nace.
Dr. Jody Nace. Yeah.
She was here originally.
Right.
Yeah,
She was an assistant
trained her.
principal at the middle school.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's a great leader.
Assistant middle school.
Mrs. Fryrick, York Adams Academy report?
Just to let you know that as of Friday, we had 11 of our 12 seats filled at the York Adams Academy, and things are going quite well, and we're very pleased with their new director, Chris Holtz. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Mason, anything from the Tax Bureau?
We have a meeting Monday, October 30th.
So that you don't feel lonely on Monday nights by not having a school meeting, right? We'll take care of that for you. Mrs. Schrader, York County School of Technology?
Yes, we meet this week on Thursday, and I'm sure budget will be the hot topic, so.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just a little quick summary that Rich and I were up at the conference last Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
The PSBA.
PSBA annual conference at the Hershey Lodge. Attended a couple sessions together, a couple sessions individually, very good, some interesting speakers. They always have the exhibit hall for you to go through and check on that. And one thing that we were both impressed by, the bagpipe band at the beginning of one of our meetings was outstanding. I can't remember what school district it was.
Liberty.
Liberty from
Bethlehem.
Oh, Bethlehem.
Outstanding, and then right after them was like a fight and drum corps. They played, and then they put them both together, and I mean, everybody on their feet applauding, feet applauding. So it was a really good conference and opportunity to, and then we were both representatives of the delegate meeting at the end of the conference where we vote on new bylaws and some revisions to the platform, to the PSBA platform that is presented to the legislature. So all in all, it was very interesting, and the announcement of the officers and particular interest, Eric Wolfgang, the local guy, was elected. For those of you who may remember, we went through that process a few meetings ago. So that was
He's going to be vice president?
Yes, he will be vice president. President-elect is Dave Hutchinson of Center County, and Mike Fascinato will remain as president because he was acting president this year. So they have a full slate of things to do, hoping to get ready for NSBA that meets in Philadelphia in 2019, which would hopefully begin the beginning of the 125th anniversary celebration of PSBA, which is the oldest school board association in the country. So perhaps there'll be something here. So everybody mark your calendars for of transportation money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else, any other board members have anything else to say? The board meeting and committee meeting schedule is linked. Other than Ms. Mason, I'm sorry to report that there is no meeting next Monday. So for those of you who've been attending Monday night school board meetings sequentially for now 7 weeks, you are free next Monday evening. We'll meet again on Monday, the 6th of November. And there is, the Finance Committee meeting follows that. Am I correct, Mr. Pose? Now it's mid-November, the 18th or something like that.
Yes.
Can't be 15th, I was going to say, and Mrs. Farwick, is there a facilities meeting
Yes, there is on
scheduled?
the 9th, the 8th, 9th.
The 8th, Wednesday the 8th.
It's the day
Okay,
after
so we'll meet again in public session of our planning meeting before any of the committee meetings occur. This is the second time during the meeting when we invite public comment. I want to welcome our German student. We had a York Twinning student at our house for several weeks a number of years ago, and I hope you have a good experience. Anyone, Mr. Grau?
The lady was going to comment.
I don't know, I was just welcoming her.
Right. I'd like to address this to you, okay?
You can certainly try.
And you will see great interaction. I mentioned at the outset, only Kathy Schaefer had any affirmation for the departing superintendent. And I'm wondering what your attitude is toward this. Neither you nor anybody else spoke, okay, in the affirmation. I'm wondering if you'd like to make any comments about her departure.
She was here for 27 years and she served the district well, and I wish her the very, very best.
Okay?
Okay?
Glad to hear you say that. I wish it
Absolutely.
forward. As I told you, I met with her a number of times, and she always answered my questions, and there'd be different things here she'd attempt to answer. So
Absolutely. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Thank you for your response. I really appreciate that.
If not, I will adjourn this meeting. We do have an executive session to follow. Let's take about 6 or 7 minutes. We'll meet at 8:35. It's going to be, it could be. We'll see. That might depend on Mr. Pose.